Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo / Greg Tompsett Sports Show here on this Wednesday nights. I know it's been a weird couple days for Bills fans, and obviously, uh, kind of trying to bounce back from the loss. Hopefully, a lot of you guys got to check out the film room that Eric and Anthony just wrapped up, kind of taking you through how and why what happened. But tonight, I am going to be walking people through a quick salary cap update. We will be doing our full kind of staff wide salary cap spectacular extravaganza coming up in a couple weeks here, where we'll go through some of the things I talk about tonight, but all kinds of other options and different things and get ideas from other guys across the Cover One staff and get their suggestions and ideas of what we want to do. As Titan here said, I kind of joked about retiring on the post game show, but I normally do take a break. I normally do need a minute, just kind of decompress, get away from football for a minute, and had planned to do that. And plan to do that long enough for Aaron and his family to make plans tonight to be able to do something different. So as I changed my mind, he told me I was a jerk because they already made plans. I said, oh, well, fine. I'll talk about the salary cap instead. So obviously, I've been getting a lot of questions about this. A lot of folks are very, very interested in what is going on with the Bills salary cap. They're, excuse me, they're talked about by a fair amount of different national folks because of the salary cap position that they're in, and it's not great. We'll get into it in a minute, but there's plenty of options, and I'll show you how quickly they can work through that. If you saw our bye week update that we did back in December, a few things have changed since then. So obviously, I'll talk about some of the players that have given us a different perspective, more sample size, more information on whether they should be a pay cut, a release, a restructure, an extension. We'll talk about that when we get to all the options. But the first thing I want to bring up is there's been some new information that's come out since then. So obviously there are generally two very good resources out there in the marketplace, overthecap.com and spottrack.com. I use both sites. I like the detail and information on Over the Cap, but both sites are very, very good and make sense. Different people just prefer the user interface for some versus others. Jason Fitzgerald, who's the leader at Over the Cap, wrote a pretty good explanation here about some of the changes. And I was of the same mindset that Jason was, that a lot of the things that were said, there would be kind of a catch-up period from the COVID year, and that we would see some of the new TV money and things push in, and we would get up to, I projected 250. He had 255 million as the salary cap. Right now, the information that's come out, and we do not know what the official 2024 salary cap will be, but we've heard things around 242 million. So overthecap.com has 242 even. SpotTrack is estimating 242.5. As he says here, for most of the league, whether it's 242 or 255 doesn't really matter a lot. The reason is because most of them have plenty of cap room, and you can, be flexible and shuffle things around however you want. However, he does reference teams like the Saints, Chargers, Bills, and Dolphins. It does make it a little bit harder because you were already in a pinch needing to make moves, and now all of a sudden you have even less space to be able to work with. So as we go into the Bills options for things, you'll be able to go onto their sites and play around. You can do, for cuts, and it'll show you what the dead money is. So money, cash, we've already paid the player. Again, for anyone who wants to sign up for our Cover One Pass, I did a salary cap 101 series that walks through all the terms and different things so you understand what everything means. Dead money that gets talked about a lot is cash you've already paid a player, but you haven't accounted for it on the salary cap yet. So you see that in signing bonuses and, prorated option bonuses and different things like that. You already gave the player money, but you haven't accounted for it on the salary cap yet. If you release the player, you have to account for that because you already gave them the money. That's dead money, dead cap. You hear that term thrown around a lot. So Josh Allen is the easiest one to give an example. We've already paid him $102 million that we haven't accounted for on the cap yet. So if you released him, it would cost us $102 million in dead cap right then. It would count as a $102 million cap hit that year. So it would cost us 55 million more than what we're already planning for. So I bring that up because there's a couple players I'm going to touch on right now that I'm not really going to talk about during the show because there's not really much of an option. Von Miller is one that's thrown out there all the time. A lot of fans. He was obviously a disappointment this season. No one is arguing that. We did see some uptick. He had some nice pass rush moves in the Pittsburgh game. He actually had some pretty solid contributions in the KC game, very close on a couple sacks, had some good pressures, had a couple tackles for a loss and run game, sniffing out some screen game. If anything, you'll cling to that saying, hey, maybe we'll get contribution next year. Unfortunately, we have to hope that because there's still $32 million that we haven't accounted for that we've paid Von Miller. He's going to count for that money, whether he's on the team or not. So releasing him, whether you do it before June 1st or after June 1st, we still got to make up that $32 million. So some people will try to put it as, oh, if we do it after June 1st, we save money. Well, no, you just kick 15 million out of the 32 million we owe into 2025 and make next year even worse. Our only opportunity is to hope he contributes more. He's not going to be a good value. We're not going to get $24 million worth of pass rusher out of him, but he's going to be on the team. We just got to hope he plays better. That's it. There's a couple others in a similar boat. Dawson Knox is a player. People were disappointed in his pay. We still owe him $20 million in cap that hasn't been accounted for, that we paid him cash. Cutting him, we lose $6 million. It costs $6 million more to cut him. So there's a couple players like that I'm just not going to spend Tyler Bass, another one. Obviously, people were very frustrated that he missed. A lot of us have lost confidence in him as a player. I do hope the team brings in some competition just to kind of motivate him. But realistically, we can't do anything. If we release him, we would pay $7.3 million for him not to be on the team, plus whatever we pay the new kicker. So our only opportunity is to hope he plays better and that we get more out of him. So those are three players you're not going to see in my projected moves of releases, even though a lot of people want them to. I'll talk about Stefon Diggs tonight for a different reason, but he's another one. We owe $31 million for him that we haven't accounted for yet. So releasing him does nothing. So there's a couple things there that we'll talk about with his contract and what we're planning on for him in the future, but we'll get to that here in a bit. So I share those things because those are some players that I get asked about a lot. It's not always easy to explain why can't we just release it, move on from them? It's just not that simple. Some of those players, we've already paid them cash that we haven't gotten yet. Keeping them on the team and hoping they improve is really our only chance. So that's all we've got in that space. So I am going to go through a handful of moves here, talk about where we go, what it does, and we'll start by sharing the spreadsheet I put together and the detail of what is out there. And the first thing it starts with is a big scary number up here in the right. $50,603,109. That's how far right now, if the new NFL league year started, that's how far over the salary cap we would be if things started right now. Obviously, that's not going to happen. Every team has to be under the salary cap. You don't have the option of staying over the cap. You have to be able to make maneuvers to be able to get yourself into space. So right now, with the projected $242 million cap here, Jeffrey was asking, how are you projecting? I think I thought it was going to come in higher because I had the same perception Jason did it over the cap. I expected it to go higher than what it is. Right now, we've heard $242 million. We'll see. When that number becomes official, everybody will know, and then I'll adjust my spreadsheet as to what it is. I'm going based on the current projection of $242 million. That puts the Bills, unfortunately, at $50 million over the cap. So $292 million in change. That's where the Bills are right now. So we're going to start at the top. I have some base salary restructures. Again, a restructure is where you take, if someone has a $20 million salary, you could take 19 million of it, turn it into a signing bonus and spread it out over 5 years to where you're only accounting for 20% of that in this first year. Keep the usually 1 million. Sometimes it's 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 million, depending on how long the player has been in the league, but roughly a $1 million base salary, and spread the rest of the money out over time. So the first name you're going to see on here is Joshua Patrick Allen. Josh Allen, we talked about him. Obviously, there's no risk of him not being on the team. There will come a time where we do have to kind of take our medicine. We've restructured Josh multiple times already in the first couple years of his extension. Unfortunately, we don't have a choice right now. We have to restructure him because he's like half of the money by himself, and there literally are not enough other pieces to put together. You'll see by the end, you couldn't really do it without him. I do think we're going to have to take our medicine with Josh and not restructure for one of the years. Maybe we don't restructure and we give him kind of the pay raise bump that KC just did with Patrick Mahomes to make sure he's up there with the other guys making 55 million or so like everybody else. That will come in the next year or two. Maybe that's the year we don't do a restructure, but giving him new money lets us play around with it a little bit. It isn't going to be this year. No matter what, we have to be able to make that move because it's such a large portion of the cap. So we'll see where that goes. The second one is a big number. I have Stefon Diggs being restructured. I'll show you at the end what it would look like if we remove that. There are a lot of people, and I won't lie, there's a case to be made that maybe we shouldn't restructure Stefon Diggs. Right now, you'll see as I go through the numbers, those two together, that 36 million that they create, we need that money. Last year at this time, I had a same show. I went through some of the different pieces. The Bills were 16 million and change projected to be over the cap. Right now, we're 50 million over the cap. That is a $34 million difference between last year and this year. Brandon Beane talked about it in his end of season press conference. Everyone made contracts and structured things not knowing the pandemic would exist and not knowing what it would do to revenues and all the different projections for money. And then all of a sudden it happened. Now you're in this position. So there is a possibility you could hold the line and not do anything with Stefon Diggs if you thought you were going to move on from him next year. He's still got 4 years left on his contract. If you thought you were going to move on from Stefon Diggs next year, there's nothing you could do this year. It is what it is this year. In theory, you could hold the line and not do this. It gets tight. You wouldn't be able to do any other moves. It's the same reason we're not doing anything with Von Miller. We need to keep the option to cut him next year. Next year, we can cut Von Miller. We can't this year. But next year we could because we're not going to mess with his contract or do anything. Dawson Knox, in a year or two, we'd have the option not to do anything. I don't think that we're going to be in a position to cut Stefon Diggs next year. I just don't think that's going to be the case. Because of that, since we're not going to cut him, in my estimation, I'm comfortable doing a restructure to create the 13 million in cap space we need to function as a team. So I'll show you at the end what it would look like without it. It is possible. It's tighter. There would be no Leonard Floyd contract this year. There would be no Connor McGovern contract this year, but you could function. You could run as a team and not do a Stefon Diggs contract. So that's what you need to decide is if you want the flexibility to add one or two mid-level pieces. Last year we did Deonte Harty, we did Connor McGovern, we did Leonard Floyd. 2 out of those 3 worked out pretty well. So they were worthwhile. Connor McGovern was great. Leonard Floyd was great. They were worth the money we signed them for. If you want the option to do that, you need to do a Stefon Diggs deal. So let's keep moving along. The next 2 are pretty easy ones. These are guys we signed last year. There's no risk that we're going to move on from them. They're young players. They're going to be here for multiple years in the future. Those 2 together, it's over $7 million. Ed Oliver and Connor McGovern, both of them played and either met or exceeded their contract. I think they both played more than the money they were worth. If you look, Ed Oliver was paid as the 11th to 15th highest paid defensive tackle by some estimate. There's some guys listed as defensive end because they play in a 3-4 that are really D tackles. I think he was actually closer to the 16th to 18th highest paid D tackle. He played better than that. He was much better than the 16th to 18th best or the 11th best defensive tackle. Connor McGovern was paid like the 35th highest paid guard. He was better than that. I thought they both did well. Those are the kind of guys that are easy base salary restructures. They're young, healthy players. That's an easy $7 million we create there. Now we get past that and we get into 3 players that I have projected for extensions. These are 3 players that all performed very, very well. No one is going to argue. Dawkins probably had the best season of his career. Taron Johnson was literally voted to the All-Pro team, second team All-Pro. Rasul Douglas was even better than we saw coming in as a trade candidate. All 3 of them are under contract for this year. They're not free agents. We don't have to worry about it. But each of them are going into the last year of their deal. When you're going into the last year of your deal, that's an easy year to do an extension. We've seen this previously with Mitch Morse. We've seen it previously with Micah Hyde. We've seen it previously with Jordan Poyer, where when they get into the last year of their deal, we do a short extension after that. We kick some of that money down the line and we make them cheaper for this year. All 3 of these guys are not only coming into the last year of their deal, they're not, in my opinion, they're not near the end either. Each of them have 2, 3, 4, Taron probably more than that, years to come in the future where this isn't going to be the last year they're performing well. Dawkins is playing like a good left tackle, not elite, but good. Rasul Douglas was playing, as Jason here said, Douglas was such a good fit for this team. Would love to extend him. He's perfect. He's going to be great. We'll see who he plays opposite of. I think there's some discussion there. But he's going to be one of our starting cornerbacks next year. The good news is he's already under contract. It's like $9.9 million. I'll give him 2 more years at that money, and we'll be able to reduce that cap hit down by giving him a signing bonus, make him cheaper, help it out. Those are 3 numbers that I think are very, very easy. I don't think any Bills fan is looking to get rid of these guys, and extending them, we can create up to $18.6 million. Some of that's not perfect, depending on how big of a signing bonus you give them or if they get a raise. Taron Johnson's probably the biggest one. He was playing on a deal that was a pretty good deal for us. He probably deserves a raise. That number could go up. So maybe this is only 3.5 or 4 million in savings, not 4.7. There's still savings to be had. We can reduce it. So again, those are all ones that I think are very, very likely. I don't know that we're going to do all 7 of them, but I think it's pretty likely if we do them, boom, we get to $11.3 million right off the bat. That's going above, making up for the 50 plus an extra 11. So those ones together are almost $62 million in cap space. That gets us to functional franchise space. So just doing those, we now get to, we can sign our draft picks, we can fill out the roster with at least minimum level players. A lot last year, he gave out all those $1.77 million deals because they were below the comp pick formula. Maybe we need that again, depending on where Gabe Davis goes, where AJ Epinesa goes, where Leonard Floyd goes. We'll see where those guys go. We'll have more of those $1.5, $1.77 million deals. That gets us down there. We can now function as a franchise. We can work that out. The next group I have bucketed together as releases or pay cuts. Some of them, I'm going to tell you, I'm pretty sure they're going to be released. But there's actually most of the guys on the list, I think, are roster caliber positions, or roster caliber guys. They're going to be on an NFL roster somewhere. Someone's going to sign them. They probably aren't worth as much as we're paying them, but the Bills also have some leverage to be able to say, hey, we don't think you're going to get this much money on the open market, and we could release you and save this money, but we don't really want to release you. We'd like you to be on the team. Why don't you give us a little bit of the money back? We'll take a little bit and convert it over into a not likely to be earned incentive, but if you play well, you could achieve it and earn that incentive. It could be if the Bills go to the Super Bowl, that'd be one that you could put out there. Anyone you give an AFC Championship game or Super Bowl incentive, if we get there, they'll earn the money, but we don't have to count it against the cap because we didn't achieve that this year. FYI, if you weren't aware, the Bills didn't go to the AFC Championship game, the Super Bowl. So if you missed that's just an update for you. Doing that, you will have the chance now to hide some money where the player can have an opportunity to earn it back, but it doesn't count against the cap. So I'm going to go through some. I have them in decreasing order of likelihood, of staying on the team. So the first one, Sam Martin, I think it's going to be a release. Maybe you invite him back to camp. Maybe they draft a guy and they invite him back to camp. He started out the year really rough. He actually had a very good ending to the year, of course, until he hurt his hamstring and then was terrible in the playoff game. He had moments where he was exceptional, and really, really good. Some moments in the Miami game that he was a reason that we won that game. He was a genuine contributor to that game and some others during the year. I assume we're going to get a cheaper guy or a draft pick, and that maybe he's invited to camp, but that's easy money. $1.3 million in savings is too easy to do. Maybe they invite Matt Araiza back. I know a lot of people have brought that up. I think he's a perfect example of now there's more information available, and lots of people, I acknowledge myself, kind of reacted to the initial reports that were out there. I think it's possible he's invited back to camp. We'll see. I think he gets a chance in the NFL somewhere. We'll see if it's with Buffalo. The next one is my borderline of pay cut versus release, and it's Siran Neal. So each of these, the number I put for Sam Martin is I'm assuming we release him and we get the full amount. Each of the remaining guys, I've estimated kind of a halfway point between how much we would save releasing him versus the leverage that would give, and what we could then project. Hey, if you give us back part of that money, we'll keep you for half of the savings. So I basically took most of the rest of the guys and cut the number in half, that if they agree to come halfway between what we'd save if we release them versus what they still make, they would stay on the team. So Siran Neal's my first one at a $2 million pay cut. If they release him, it's almost $3 million in savings if we release him. So I think he's borderline. I don't know that he played at we're paying him like an elite special teams player. We're paying him like Matthew Slater got paid for the Patriots. I think he's good. I think he's fine. I don't think he played in the elite level to be paid at one of the highest paid special teams player in the league. I think we can do better in that spot. So again, if he wants to come back for a pay cut, I'd be open to it. Nyheim Hines. I actually adjusted this after comments from Brandon Beane. I very much assumed that he was going to be a release. He's about to get paid $5 million. I think he is a perfect example where literally any incentive is unlikely to be earned because he didn't accrue any statistics last year. So, 100 yards receiving on the season would be an unlikely to be earned incentive. 1 receiving touchdown, 10 passes caught, anything you put out there for kick return or punt return, it would be unlikely to be earned. So he's an easy one to hide money and make it that he could earn the money back. You could obviously make them higher incentives than that, so he actually has to achieve something good. But Brandon Beane talked about him as though he's going to be back in some capacity. I do not expect it to be a $5 million backup running back. I do expect him to take a pay cut, but we'll see what that number is. I projected it at $3.5 million. You knock his base down to $1.5 million, and you put unlikely to be earned incentives out there where he could earn half the money back, and he could make it where he could earn $3-4 million if he has a really good season. And if he does, God bless him. If he has a great season, he deserves some more money. But right now, I had that as a release. I expect that to be a pay cut, and that he'll be back at a cheaper number. And as Bill's Electric brings up here, he's a perfect example where he doesn't have any leverage in this situation. And this is the cruel, cold business element of a human game. He tore his ACL. He's coming back from injury. No one is going to pay him $5 million. So if they invite him back at a lower number, what's he going to do? Say, no, he could, and just say, hey, I want to, and he would probably have to sign for the minimum with someone else. So he may do that just on principle and just be offended that they asked him for more money back. I don't expect that to be the case. I expect him to be back, and I expect it to be at a lower number. Next one, Deonte Harty. This one I'm torn on. This is another one where we could save like 4.8 million. I don't have the number in front of me right now. The Bills could save almost 4.1 million by releasing Deonte Harty. He's obviously not going to get paid that, but he's also not going to get paid that anywhere else. Not that I'm swayed by 1 punt return for a touchdown. I'm not, but it did show there were moments that he had contributions here and there. I don't mind him as a depth receiver return guy on the team, it's got to be way, way cheaper. So I have him basically the equivalent of what we would save if we knocked him down to the minimum and he was just back at a like minimum veteran salary. And you could add some incentives so he could earn a little bit of money back. But I'm assuming that he's there. Here, Adam Ritter bringing up KJ Hamler is absolutely going to be competing with Deonte Harty. They're pretty similar guys who have struggled to stay healthy on the field, guys who had moments coming out. Hardy's done more in the NFL. He had an all-pro season as a returner. Hamler hasn't done much in the NFL, but a lot of people liked him coming out of Penn State. And he is absolutely the kind of guy who will be competing with them. And I expect them to also be competing probably with our 4th round pick as a second. I think we'll draft 2 receivers this year. And the second pick will probably be part of that too. We'll see where that goes. We'll see what that does. Just like Justin Shorter will be competing with that spot for Siran Neal. So we'll see where that one goes. I won't be shocked if he's released. It could just save the full money and release him and let him go and figure it out later. If he's back, it will be at a reduced number. Those 4 are the most likely to me, and the tipping point of I could see him back, but I think it's 50-50 or greater, or the team has a lot of leverage to be able to bring them back. At a lower number, they don't have all that much leverage in the marketplace to push back. They pretty much have to take what they get offered, or else they'll just have to go fight for a roster spot somewhere else. The next group gets into some veterans who have more value on the team, have a greater role in the locker room, but also probably have more value in the marketplace and have a little bit more leverage to push back with the team, or at least to negotiate. The first one is Mitch Morse. We've already done this once with Mitch Morse. We've gone to him and kind of threatened to release him and got him to do a restructure and a pay cut. If we release him, it could save $8 million. To be completely honest, I kind of think that's what it would cost to replace him. He's better than Ryan Bates. I think Ryan Bates would be okay stepping for him. Maybe that's one of the moves we have to make, that we have to just go from Mitch Morse to Ryan Bates and save the $8 million and move on. And that's just what we got to do. I kind of took his number even a little bit above half and said, hey, if you give us a little bit of the money back, we want to run this back. He did mention if the team wants him back, he wants to come back again. He's under contract for 1 more year. I don't think you extend him. I don't think you do any restructure to spread any money out. I think you just ask him for a little bit of a pay cut and say, hey, we can't quite pay you that much. It's almost 11 million he would count. If you knock that down to 8 million-ish, we'd love to have you back and to run this back one more time and see if we can go win ourselves a championship. We'll see. I'm torn. I don't know if we would get it, but I put it on here because I think it's possible that we could see that number. I think it's more likely he would have a pay cut or just stay as is than be released, but I'm not naive. It's obviously possible that they would release him and just save the money. I don't think that's the way they're going to go, but I won't try to pretend that it's not possible. It is possible. The next one, Tre White. Tre White's a tough one. Beloved in the locker room. You can tell every time Sean McDermott talks about him how much he loves Tre White. It was his first draft pick. He's been an all-pro for the team. The locker room loves him. He counts $16 million against the salary cap this year. It's not Dawson Knox or Von Miller level of bad value, but it's very unlikely we're going to get a $16 million player for him. Unfortunately, no matter what, if we release him, he still counts $10 million against the cap. So we would be paying $10 million for him not to be on the team on the salary cap. The $6 million you could save, I think it would cost that much to replace him as a contributing, still very likely starting caliber corner. We'll see. I don't see him as a player that they would just kick to the curb as he's going through his rehab from an Achilles. I do think he's a guy that they could have a difficult conversation with and say that they need to convert some of that into not likely to be earned incentives based on snap count, just based on, hey, if you're out there and playing the snaps as the starting corner and you've recovered and you're ready to go, you'll earn all this money back. And if it's Rasul Douglas on this side and Tre White on that side, that'll be the best starting corner duo we've had since like back with freaking Nate Clements and Antonio Winfield and guys like that. It will be the best combo we've had in a long, long time. Also, Christian Benford played pretty well. And that's not even counting anything from Kaiir Elam. So I don't think we're going to re-sign Dane Jackson. I think he'll go and sign somewhere else, probably some Levi Wallace type deal with somebody else that he'll get a chance to start for another, probably struggling team. So we saw this year how important it is to have 3 or 4 outside corners. We also don't even have a backup nickel. We saw the pain of that. We need to draft and develop or have one of these guys learn how to play nickel. And a couple of guys here asking, can he play safety? I'm not sure which guy Dwight's talking about because I think you can ask that about multiple guys. I don't know if the Bills are going to move Tre White or Christian Benford or Kaiir Elam to safety. It's way, way easier to say that than it is to do it. Micah Hyde did move from corner to safety. He was a nickel corner in Green Bay, and we moved him to safety. That certainly went pretty well. I don't know that Tre or Kaiir Elam have the run support ability to tackle, but I'll say, if there's plenty of guys in the chat here talking about tackling ability, what is the first thing you think of with Micah Hyde? Is Micah Hyde the first thing you think of, his robust tackling ability? Like, he's fine, but that's not like his strength either. His strength is as a great center fielder and the ability to read defenses and make plays in pass protection. I don't think that's dramatically different than what we see with Tre White, Christian Benford, Kaiir Elam. If one of them were to move to safety, we know it was openly talked about with Christian Benford. I think he probably played a little too well at corner to now move, but there's also a possibility that they say, hey, if Tre White comes back and Rasul Douglas is back, we need to figure out a way to get our 5 best guys on the field. And one of those 5 best guys is Christian Benford. We got to move him to get him on the field and be able to figure out a way to make this work. So I don't know where that's going to go. I don't personally see it with Tre White or Kaiir Elam moving to safety, but crazier things have happened. They talked about it with Benford. He also played well at corner. If they release Tre White, it would be because they believe Christian Benford can be that starting safety opposite of him. So we'll see where that goes. Jeffrey, I'm mad at you. You're asking that question because you didn't watch the beginning of the show. So now you have to log off because you're not allowed to watch anymore. We already talked about why we're extending Rasul Douglas because he's fantastic. So again, I do not think there are lots of people throwing out there the numbers. If we release Tre White, I don't think that's nearly as likely as people make it out to be. Again, just like my comment on Mitch Morse, I'm not naive. I'm not going to pretend it's not possible. $6 million in savings is a real number. Of course it's possible. I don't think it's likely. I do not think they're going to release Tre White. I will be surprised. I'll obviously admit it if I'm wrong. I do not expect that to happen. I expect him to be on the team. I won't be shocked if they get him to convert some of that money over into some kind of games played or snap count ability to do that. All right, Jeffrey, you redeemed yourself. This is a good question. You're allowed to stay. Do you need permission to restructure from the players? Yes. The answer is yes, you do. However, the Buffalo Bills and Brandon Beane build it into the original contracts when players sign with the Bills. You agree that in the future, the team has the right to restructure your base salary if they see fit. So for other teams that don't do that, they have to go to their players to ask them, hey, would you mind restructuring? They never mind. They're just getting a check up front for game checks down the line. Everybody will take free money now rather than getting it later. Anybody who invests money will tell you money now is worth more than money later. You can invest it now and make more money on your money. Especially the numbers we're talking about with these guys. Investing your money, you get more money back than what it can be worth in the future. So base salary restructures means getting a check up front in March rather than game checks each week during the season. So almost no one ever declines it, but the Buffalo Bills get ahead of that. They build it into their structure and their contracts, just like Josh Allen's contract. I've shown the language from his contract before that I've gotten from sources. It shows the language of exactly how they build it in there, and that the team has the right to restructure those deals ahead of time. So the player does have to agree to it. For the Bills, they agree to it ahead of time when they sign their original contract to let the team do it in the future. Steve asking here, can they release Tre White while he's injured? That would absolutely be a part of it. If they were, it would be an injury settlement. There's lots of other things in play here. That all the more reason why it's not nearly as simple as the people saying, oh, they should release him. So it would not happen for a while. If they did it, it would be after he passed physical, different pieces like that. All the more reason why I don't anticipate that happening. Back to our list. Another one here, the last one I have is Jordan Poyer. Obviously everybody saw the letter from Amanda Hyde, Micah Hyde's wife. It certainly read to me like a preemptive retirement announcement. So everybody saw Micah Hyde last year go out with the neck injury and have to have the spinal fusion injury. When he had the stinger in the game earlier this year, and everyone saw that panicked, frightened, like leg kicking reaction when he had the stinger, he didn't know it was a stinger. He thought it was something serious. He was fearing in that moment. I'm putting words in his mouth. It's not fair, but I'm going to project what I saw. I saw a man who was worried he just permanently injured his neck or paralyzed himself or impacted his life in the future. That was the kind of reaction, because he was afraid that's what just happened. He came back and played because he's a tough son of a gun. I think that caused some very real conversations at home. They had those conversations and talked about it openly beforehand. I am going to project that Micah Hyde is retiring. Jordan Poyer is under contract. I think Jordan had some moments. He signed at a very reasonable deal. They may not approach him at all because it's already pretty reasonable and pretty cheap. I think there's a chance that they move on. We just talked about the guys they would be considering moving to safety do not have the tackling or ability in the box of what Jordan did. I know he had some moments playing as a dime linebacker. He's also like 190, 195 pounds. I don't know that he could play every single snap at linebacker in the NFL. I'm torn. I don't for sure know where I fall on this one. My gut is they do nothing and he's back as is. I won't be shocked if his own pride, he's not interested in a pay cut, and that if they approach him, he would ask for his release. So I have a feeling this number would actually be the full savings, that if they released him, it's like 5.7 million. And if he stays on the team, it stays as is, and that there's not really much of a chance of in the middle for the salary cap. But I listed it here just as a point of reference that it's possible. Those ones together now put us up to 30 million. I actually think this 30 million number is accurate, because I think there's most of these I cut in half, and I have Sam Martin being released, and I have all the rest of them staying on the team at a pay cut. Any of them that get released, this number just about doubles for most of these guys down here at more than, for Morse, it more than doubles. Tre and Poyer, I did about half. So I think some of these, if they get released, the savings is actually higher. That higher savings on someone getting released would probably make up for one of the guys who doesn't get a pay cut. I think the additional, these ones combined here are 18.8 million. I think getting 15 million plus from this group is very, very likely. I think that is a doable number. And that all of a sudden gets us from 11 million to 30 million. 30 million in cap space now. Now we're talking a regular offseason. Now you're talking signing all your draft picks, adding in some cheap veteran guys, lots of the $1.77 million deals. Again, plenty of those paid off. Taylor Rapp was a really nice addition for that. David Edwards was a really nice addition for that. We had some nice $1.77 million deals that paid off really well. Heck, Terrell Dotson ended up being a fantastic value for what we got him for. It would then let us also do one or two splurge type deals. So the 1 or 2 splurge type deals, I mean last year's value. So we paid $9 million for Leonard Floyd. We split some of that money out. We paid about $6-7 million in change for Connor McGovern. We paid almost $5 million for Deonte Harty. Again, 2 out of those 3 signings work because not all free agents signings work. So when I say that, our new version of splurge is the $5 to $9 million range. We can't go $20 million free agent shopping. That isn't our world anymore. We just can't do that. We did it once with Von, of course. The Von Miller we saw in the Rams game and the Chiefs game, closing it down, top 10 in the NFL in sacks before the ACL injury. We were getting what we thought, but it didn't work out. We can't do that anymore. So those ones, I think we can get ourselves to at least 25 million in cap space. So 25 million in cap space, I think, is a conservative estimate where most of these moves on the screen right now, I think we see a lot of these. Not all of them. I'm certainly not going to go whatever. I think I have. There's 7 up there. 7. Yeah, I'm not going to go 14 for 14. I'm sure not every single one of these transactions will happen, but I think plenty of them will. And I show this because there's a possibility if we did almost all the other 13 of these, you could, in theory, not kick anything down the road with Stefon Diggs, leave yourself the option to be able to move on from him next year. There's nothing you could do to move on from him this year, but it's in theory, you could move on from him next year. Next year, you could release Stefon Diggs and do some different, or trade him more likely, and be able to move on from him. It's still plenty of dead money next year, but it's at least possible. I think it's much more likely that we keep him, but you can see we still could get to 17 million in cap space. You need most of that. Signing your draft picks, having in-season money for the IR moves, you need almost like $10 million for that to work. So leaving $7 million in cap space, there is not enough money to do much of anything. That's just minimum guys and small, low-level value signing. So if you don't do a Stefon Diggs base salary restructure, you wouldn't be able to sign anyone for more than like $3 million. That means no Daquan Jones extension, no AJ Epinesa extension, no Leonard Floyd extension, obviously no Gabe Davis extension. You wouldn't be able to do any of those moves. So I think for that reason, we need that 13 million. That 13 million is how we would extend Daquan Jones. It's how we would extend, one of Leonard Floyd or AJ Epinesa and be able to bring someone back into some of those rooms to where we need some people. I put a couple more down here. There are some things I don't think we would do, but in theory are possible. So I don't think, we obviously know Dawson Knox is already not a good value. I don't see that happening. You could save $6 million by restructuring his deal. We cannot kick that can further down the road. It's just not feasible to be able to do that. So the situation that we're in, I just shrank this for no reason. In order to do that, I think it introduces too much risk. So the same idea. I love Matt Milano. I fully expect him to come back fully healthy. He's also going to be 30. I don't know that I want to kick his contract down the road further. I won't be upset if they do because Matt's awesome and I'm happy to have him on the team. So it's $2.4 million. If they want to save that money, I won't freak out. The same thing. Ryan Bates has been a nice luxury. He didn't even need to play this year because all of our linemen started every single game. Most of the time that doesn't happen. You also can't release him either because he has guaranteed money on his contract because of the structure that was made by the Bears when we matched his offer. I also don't want to restructure it and kick more of it down the road. But in theory, those 3 are $10.6 million more in cap space you could create for 3 guys that I'm confident are going to be on the roster this year and probably the year after. So those are all some numbers that in theory you could do. I don't think they will, but it's more money available if you wanted to. So looking at this group, I think there's 17 moves on the screen here. I think we see quite a few of these. I think we see the vast majority of them, to be completely honest. But it won't be all 17. Even the ones I put up here that are likely, maybe we don't get an extension done with everybody. These restructures, I will be shocked if those 4 don't happen. I think absolutely those 4 and the 43 million in cap space they create we need that money. We absolutely need that to happen. The same thing, whether these guys are released or take pay cuts, I don't think more than 1 or 2 of these guys are back on the team at the same salary they were. I think it's possible 5 or 6 of these 7 guys are back on the roster again. They're not going to be at the same money that they're getting paid now. So we will see some savings from this group as well. I don't know if it's going to be the full 18.8 million I projected here. That number can be higher if we release more of them, especially if we released a Mitch Morse or a Tre White. Those are bigger numbers. If we release Nyheim Hines or Deonte Harty, they're bigger numbers. So we'll see. I kind of met in the middle and compromised on those ones. But that shows you the combinations we could make. Again, there's some restructures I don't think we're going to do, but it's possible. All told, if more of these were releases and the full numbers, I could get this number up to like 45, 46 million in cap space. It's not going to happen. They're not going to flip every switch and pull every lever of what they could do. But it shows you that even though there's a very scary starting point at $50 million right here, it's very, very doable to get us into operational mode where we can, again, we're not going to splurge. It's going to be just like last year. Lots of $1.7 million signings, 1 or 2 guys that are making $3, $4, $5, $6 million. We will sign a few free agents, but it's just not going to be that much. It's not going to be that much into what they're doing. So as I get ready to wrap up here, anybody who has any questions, I'll try to kick around a couple before we wrap up. So get your questions in the chat. I will go in there. The first one I see here from Titan is, will we bring back Leonard Floyd? I will say, I think my opinion has changed a little bit. I think I'm torn on, there was this point where I would have said, absolutely, yes, he played fantastic. I think he faded a little bit down the stretch. So now I think the number matters. I think that the amount of money he's looking for matters. We saw Jadeveon Clowney was out there for a long time. He signed for less than Leonard Floyd did, and he had as good or arguably a better season. I think it was way better, but I think it was pretty similar, and some would probably argue a better season. But the Dolphins waited, and they got Melvin Ingram, and Melvin Ingram didn't do nearly as much as what Leonard Floyd did. Justin Houston signed in Carolina. He didn't do nearly what Leonard Floyd did. So Floyd has some leverage, and Floyd has probably more value on the market than if we lowball him and ask for it to be back. So I'm going to say it is right there at 50-50 to be able to be back. We'll see where that goes. Working my way back up here. Dano asking, how does it work if they retire? The word retire does not exist in the NFL CBA. So in salary cap space, retire is not a thing. You either get released or you keep playing. That's it. So if you guys remember back to Eric Wood's press conference that got botched, it's because he was about to announce his retirement, and his agent and the NFL Players Association told him, you can't say that. You have to make the team release you, or else you forfeit your guaranteed money. So you don't retire, you get released. So that's why guys retire afterwards when they've already been on the market and not being paid. Retiring doesn't help anybody in cap space. It just forces the team to release you to be able to go that route. So trades, the difference in trades with cap space is if you have guaranteed salary, it goes with. So if you traded a guy, but if you've already paid people bonuses, you already paid them that money, it doesn't really help. So a good example would be a guy like Dawson Knox. If for some reason we got someone to trade for Dawson Knox, it does account for like half of his money, but I don't know that somebody else wants to pay him as a $14 million a year tight end. So I doubt someone's going to trade for that, but in theory, you could do that and it would save us some money to go that route. Kevin here, this is a really common one. What happens if a team is not under the cap when the season starts? They can't be. You can't function unless you're under the salary cap. And it's not when the season starts, it's when the league year starts. So when you see those numbers of what teams would be over the salary cap, they never are actually over the salary cap. Every single team is under the salary cap every single moment because you can't process transactions unless you're under the salary cap. You can't claim players off waivers. You can't call people up from your practice squad. You can't sign street free agents to fill in. There was actually a moment last year in week 17 or week 18 where the Giants were so close to going over that they played a game with like 52 men on their roster. They didn't even have a 53rd guy because they would have gone over and they couldn't do it. So all the things you see of the Saints always looking way over the Browns, the Dolphins, the Bills, that is what they would be if the league year started now. All of them will do what I just did, what I'm showing you on the screen here, all the spreadsheets. They'll make all the moves to be under, because otherwise you're not allowed to make draft picks and you're not allowed to do those things. In theory, there are fines and penalties and forfeit of draft picks and fines that would be levied against you. It just hasn't really ever happened. There have been like minor mistakes that people got like penalized for, but no one's ever been like, screw it, we'll be 50 million over the cap space, over the salary cap. What are you going to do? You could not function as a franchise. You wouldn't be allowed to make any draft picks. You wouldn't be allowed to even sign enough players to get back to the minimum. You couldn't fill a practice squad. You couldn't function as a franchise. You have to be under the salary cap, and every single team is every single year. Will the McGovern contract be the best type of deal we could offer in free agency? Yes. That is a very, very good comp. That is a very, very good example of the kind of deal at the high end of what we could do this year. We signed Connor McGovern to a 3-year, $22.35 million deal. We had about $10 million of it guaranteed, and he got about $7.5 million per year. That's probably the highest number we could get to, and the high end rate that would be splurging for us this year, but we could do another one of that, and that could be a starting safety, that could be a starting defensive tackle, that could be a starting receiver, that could be someone who would come in and legitimately contribute and be like Connor McGovern. He played a crazy amount of snaps for us and started every single game. That kind of player we can afford to come in at like 1, maybe 2 spots. So his number is a good example. We paid him $7.5 million a year. He counted as about $4 million as a cap hit. So that gives you a good range. Leonard Floyd was similar. We paid him $9 million in cash, but he actually counted like $2.6 million against the cap. We kick some money down the line of void years and dead cap we're going to have to make up for. But that's how you can hide money and sign guys to cheaper deals. Comments here, we need to look at Diggs as a future number 2 and go get number 1 of the draft. I 100% agree. Zach here, what are the odds that Bean actually uses all 10 draft picks? I feel the minimum you should have is 8 to do a mini reset to reduce money for the future. This is a great question, Zach. So history tells us there's a pretty low likelihood he's going to use all 10 picks because he trades up every year. I think there's going to be not only the back of his mind, but people in our front office, Terrence Gray and other, Brian Gain, really smart guys in our front office who are going to be telling him, hey, we need to bring in 10 cheap contracts. Our scouts love this draft class. They're really, really excited about the guys we have. We need to be able to do it. We for sure need our 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th round picks. If you want to mess around with the 6th or 7th round pick and trade some of those, go ahead. Do not trade away a 3rd or a 4th to move up in the 1st round. We have to sit on our hands and wait till pick 28. Don't do it. All that said, he does it every year. So of course there's a chance that he trades away our 3rd or our 4th round pick and a 5th and a 6th or 7th to package things to move up. And if it's for like the receiver that everybody wants, well, maybe nobody will freak out. Ideally, we need, and I think 8 is a good number. I would like to have all 10. I would like to invite 10 cheap contracts to camp and hope as many of them make the roster as possible. We are now turning the page. The last couple of years, we've had one of the hardest rosters to make in the NFL, where we just did not, we had like really good guys getting cut and just not like no undrafted free agents. None of our 6th and 7th round picks could even make the roster. This year, there'll be more openings. We're not going to be able to sign as many like luxury backup guys and high paid special teams guys. We're going to have to let Tyler Medikevich walk. We're going to very likely could cut Siran Neal. We're going to need other guys to step up in those spots. So that's one where I think we could see a bit more movement happen from where that goes. Working through a couple more here. When's Bean hiring you? I'm very expensive, so we'll see. We'll negotiate. If he makes a good offer, I'll consider it. Chris, I love Chris Janke. He's a great follow on Twitter. He has an encyclopedic memory of the Bills practice squads and training camp invites and all kinds of guys out there. Chris is a great guy. If a player gets a pay cut, and then gets cut during training camp, do the Bills still get the full cap savings after cutting him in training camp? It depends on the structure. So we've seen it a couple different ways. Sometimes guys just have to take a haircut, and it's just a reduction in the amount of salary they could earn. If that's the case, then the Bills still get the full savings as if they had cut him without ever negotiating the intermediary or interim pay cut. However, a lot of times there's a trade-off where, hey, you have to take a pay cut, but we will guarantee the new reduced amount. So you're going to get this amount and you're going to make the team, or you're going to get that amount of money even if you don't make the team. So I would say Jordan Poyer, Mitch Morse, Tre White have the leverage to ask for that, to where, hey, if you get me to take a pay cut, I want all the rest of the money guaranteed. Your Deonte Hartys, your Nyheim Hines, your Siran Neals, those kind of guys, they don't have that kind of leverage. They don't have that kind of ability. They would just get a pay cut, and they aren't going to get anything guaranteed, and they get what they get. So that explains the two scenarios. If you don't guarantee extra money, you get all the savings. If you guarantee any of it, obviously they get that money whether they make the team or not. Greg, what are the cap ramifications if Von Miller gets convicted, suspended by the league? Do the Bills have an out in his contract if that happens? The second part first. Yes. Von Miller has a personal conduct element in his contract. I did get that from a source that I work with. Showed me the language. I actually shared. I did not share the picture because the source asked me not to, but I've seen his contract. It does have personal conduct language. Mike Florio confirmed the same because he saw the same thing I did. However, that only matters if the NFL suspends him. The NFL has stated they will not put him on the commissioner's exempt list unless charges are brought. So right now, between that moment that happened back in November-ish, we have not seen any charges brought by the state of Texas or by the county or city where he is. If that changes and they bring criminal charges against him, I believe he would get put on the commissioner's exempt list. The commissioner's exempt list does not help us with salary cap. Nothing changes unless he gets suspended. So if charges get brought and there's enough new information to where the NFL suspends him, if they suspend him, it voids his guarantees. It would allow the Bills to release him for a significant savings. It would take a pretty healthy chunk off of what they owe him. And it would let them go back in the past to get recouped for a prorated amount of the signing bonus of this year, next year, and the third, fourth, fifth, sixth year of his contract, because those were, we paid him assuming he'd be on the team for that long. So all of those things are possible from everything I've read, and all I know is what I've read in reports and newspapers and things that have been projected. I don't know anything about his personal situation or the actual criminal case or anything that's there. From the things I've read, I do not believe that's what is going to happen. From everything that his girlfriend, I believe is the relationship, his girlfriend and the mother of his upcoming child, what she has recanted on her initial claims and stated that things were overblown. That does not remove the charges. Texas has a law where the victim cannot recant on that because obviously many people are threatened or financially coerced into recanting their statements. So the district attorney and the police and then the people involved, they decide whether the evidence decides whether charges will be brought. Everything I've read to this point does not lead me to believe that will be the case. But if that does happen and they find that a crime was committed and that he is charged with that crime, and the NFL, because of him being charged with that crime suspends him, yes, the Bills would be able to take much more aggressive action than what they're able to now, and would be able to release him. Jeff, how does an incentive count differently against the cap versus salary? So there are two kinds of incentives. There are likely to be earned incentives and not likely to be earned incentives. The super simple way to think of them is, did the player do that thing last year? So Josh Allen just had 40 touchdowns again. He's had 40 touchdowns every year for the past 4 years. Only player in the NFL history to do that. If you built an incentive next year that paid Josh extra money, if he got 40 touchdowns, it would be likely to be earned because he just did it. So if he just did it, the NFL considers it likely to be earned. If it's likely to be earned, you have to count it against the salary cap now. If he then doesn't achieve it, you get a coupon back. You get some money back. So the Bills will probably get some incentive money back on someone like Matt Milano, who probably had some incentives in his deal. He got hurt so early, he didn't achieve any of those incentives. They'll probably get a little bit of money back on things that were counting there. The opposite, if you have an incentive for something that of what a player did last year, but didn't do last year and did this year. So people know that there was an incentive in the last game of the season if Leonard Floyd got 1.5 sacks, because the Bills built an incentive into his contract if he got to 12 sacks. So he was at 10.5. If he got to 12, he would have earned like a $2 million bonus. So that was a not likely to be earned incentive because he didn't have 12 last year. He had 9.5 last year, or 10.5. I don't remember which one. So he achieved that level again, but he did not get to 12. So we didn't have to pay that. If we did, we weren't accounting for that. It would have been $2 million more on the salary cap because it was not likely to be earned. So we didn't plan for it. So that's how that works. There's two buckets. You plan for the ones that are likely. You wait and see if they achieve it on the ones that are not likely. If they're planned for, they count just like salary does right now, and you get it back if they don't get it. If they're not likely, you don't count for it, and you have to pay it if they get it, and you deal with it after the season to figure out the plus and minus. Every team has incentives, plus and minuses. They figure it out at the end of the year and net that out. Charles here asking 10 draft picks to sign. We need $2 million. That's roughly the estimate. We're going to be drafting in the low end of the first round again. So our first round pick will probably be like 2.5 to 2.8 million. Our second round pick will be like 1.5 million. So we have to pay them the difference above the minimum salary because we already will be counting like a $1 million guy there. So someone who makes 2.5 million, that's an extra 1.5. The guy who makes like the second round pick, if he gets 1.5 million, that's an extra 0.5, an extra 500,000. Those two together, that's like 2 million. Once you get to like the third round and on, those draft picks get paid as much or less than the bottom end of the minimum roster guys that we're already counting. So whether it's, I'm trying to think, the Cam Lewises of the world, or the Alec Andersons of the world, or some new 6th round pick, they make the same amount of money. You don't need extra money. So people look and say, oh my gosh, 10 draft picks. Those 10 draft picks are going to be paid $12 million. We need $12 million in cap space. We don't, because we already have a bunch of Alec Andersons and Kingsley Jonathans and Cam Lewis's on the roster making that minimum amount, and the draft pick just trades out one of those guys. So my estimate, it's a little bit higher than 2 million. It's probably closer to 2.5 million, 2.3 million. But we'll see depending on how many draft picks Brandon Beane keeps. If he moves up, when you move up, it costs more. So when we traded up for Dalton Kincaid, not only did it cost trading away the 4th round pick we traded, we also paid more for him because his contract as the 23rd pick was higher than what his contract would have been if we stayed to the 25th pick or whatever we were last year. A couple more here before I run out of voice to talk tonight. Could Beane hold off on the Diggs restructure and pull that lever later if needed? Yes. So we could wait and not do anything with Steph Diggs and see if a good value presents itself in free agency or a trade or whatever. And then decide, hey, we really want to sign that guy. Let's now restructure Stefon Diggs. So that's a good point by Chris. We do see that sometimes. They could leave one or two of those restructures in their back pocket and then do it during the season. If we saw a Rasul Douglas like opportunity to trade for somebody in season and needed to create cap space in the year, they could do that. They could pull that lever and create some space to do it then. Diggs is a pretty big one, so that 13 million is a big number. But they could set it up to wait, and if they don't see the right value in free agency and they decide they're going to hold the line anyways, and we're going to do all value level guys and no big signings, they could do that. They could figure that out, and they could do that. Dylan, how much do you think AJ Epinesa will command in free agency? Could we really realistically afford to have him back? Some of these, same thing with Daquan Jones. I'm going to save some of that for our free agency shows coming up. I'm going to tell you, I think AJ Epinesa is going to get paid too much, and we're not going to be able to afford him. I think he's going to sign with, I don't know, Atlanta or Arizona or some team like that, and he's going to get like 3 years, 24 million, like 8 million plus per year with a pretty good amount guaranteed, and we're not going to be able to hide a lot of that money. And I don't know if we're going to be able to afford him. I kind of hope we do. I thought he really blossomed in this fourth and final season. He was a good contributor. I think he's going to get paid too much. Daquan Jones, on the other hand, I do think we can get back. I think the injury is going to help us because it kind of hid him. People are going to have questions. They're not going to remember that he was like a freaking all-pro for the first 3 or 4 games before he got hurt. I think we're going to have him back. I think we're going to have like a premium draft pick, a D-tackle too. One of the top 3-round picks, I think, will be a D-tackle, and that would be a great pairing in my head. So I know a lot of people like that big monster from Texas, Sweat. Can you imagine having like Daquan Jones and like 6'4", 360 pounds worth of whatever that guy – somebody in the chat will yell at me and tell me what his name is, but his first name Sweat, or his last name Sweat. Dylan, we're all focused on the 24 salary cap and how it's tight, but is there a path where we can be in a much better spot in 25 and 26? Yeah, we're going to be fine. So some of those things that Jason from Over the Cap and myself project are coming. Like the new TV money is going to help the salary cap explode and really jump by much bigger numbers going forward. So we will see some of those things, and that will be in much better shape going forward. Right now, based on the projected salary cap in 2025, it's pretty conservative what the number is, and we're already under that number and already have pretty significant cap space for that year, like 30 million worth of cap space, and we would need to sign some players. So we're already like 20 million under the cap for that year. So yeah, we're going to be fine. From that direction, we're going to be okay. It won't be, we're not going to get back to being like flush and having tons of money, but we'll be okay. We'll be in pretty good shape. And that's with Josh Allen's full number hitting and taking like the full cap hit. So if we have Josh count as 56 million against the cap and don't do anything with him, we would still be like 20 million under the cap and be fine. So we got better years coming. What's the banana stand, coupons, or levers? I think you have it in the right order. I like a good coupon, but the banana stand's undefeated. You always have to go with the banana stand. And Fernando, obviously, for anybody who hasn't checked out Fernando's show, obviously a great fan from down south of the equator down there, checking us out all the time. Is very, very good with his content. Say it's not ideal to move any of the picks between rounds 2 to 5, but how about moving next year's first to trade up and get our new potential number 1 is with like the Stefon Diggs or the Sammy Watkins trade. So there are 2 ends of this. So this is obviously a phenomenal wide receiver draft. There are some people who think there could be like 10 first-round caliber wide receivers. It won't be that many, but there's some really, really good ones. And I think there could be like 14 receivers in the first 2 rounds. So one, obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. and Neighbors and Odunze are awesome and really, really good. They're probably going to be like top 6 to 8 round guys. Also, remember Justin Jefferson was a late first round pick. T. Higgins was the first pick of the second round. We just saw Tank Dell and Puka Nacua go in the 3rd and the 5th round. You don't have to trade up to get good receivers. And if this is a really, really stacked wide receiver class, look at all the guys contributing in Green Bay, with between Christian Watson and Jaden Reed and Romeo Dobbs and all the guys they made investments in. I would rather go that route. Sit on your hands. Don't let yourself trade up. Pick the best guy. Maybe it's Troy Franklin. Maybe it's Xavier Leggetti. Maybe it's Xavier Worthy. There's some really good guys. Someone's going to be there at pick 28. Pick the best guy that's there and then take another one in the third or the fifth round or third or the fourth round. Because there'll be another really good guy there too. So pick a couple, hope you hit and they contribute. I won't be, of course, I won't be mad if they get, Neighbors is a freak. He's like Jamar Chase. Romeo Dunes was awesome. He was awesome to watch. Of course, I'll be ecstatic if they go up and get those guys. I don't like trading away future first round picks. But if they get an awesome player, I'm going to celebrate. And I'll worry about that next year. I'll figure that out later on. I don't think that's how it's going to work, but that's there. And Chris, good suggestion here, Greg. You may want to explain the top 51 in the offseason for people who don't know. So once the season starts, your salary cap is the guys on the roster. You got 53 guys on the roster. You got to figure it out. You pay for that. You pay for the guys that you bring up from the practice squad. If you release them, you street signings, you get whoever you pay, you have in the roster, you got to pay them. And every dollar of that counts against salary cap. Between the first day of the league year and cut down day and the roster starting, teams have 90 guys on their roster. Well, you can't pay for all 90. So the NFL uses what they call the rule of 51 or the top 51 rule, where you pay for the 51 most expensive guys on your roster. They do that because they know you're going to keep some of your cheaper draft picks and that some of the more expensive guys won't make the roster. So they don't need to count 53 and you'll be fine if they just estimated it at 51. So between now and all the way to like Labor Day or whenever the cut down day is for this year, you only have to count the top 51 guys. So when I talked about the trade-off of those draft picks and whether it's an Alec Anderson or a Kingsley Jonathan or a Cam Lewis, or it's whoever your new 5th or 6th or 7th round pick is, they're just trading a different minimum salary kind of guy and bumping those guys out. That's why the bottom guys don't matter as much until it comes to who makes the roster. So good suggestion there from Chris. All right, guys, this was a ton of fun. I really, really appreciate it. Help us out, as Eric says here. Press that like button. I do this work for you guys. If anybody wants to get a last screenshot or any of the pieces here, this is where that sheet is, and I'm going to be using that for what I have for the team. Those are the numbers that I project, especially these top moves right here. These are the ones that I expect to really be the ones that we see. I have 14 on the screen here right now. If we did all of them, we'd go from 50 million down to 30. I explained some different pieces about how most of these are pay cuts. We could say more by releasing the player, but that's how we could go from 50 million over the cap to $30 million in cap space pretty reasonably and pretty quickly. So we'll see. I think that we will get to the $25 million number before free agency starts. I think that we'll get to that range and be able to have a normal offseason. We're not going to be able to do big signings, but we're going to be able to function as a franchise and be able to make this work. So I appreciate you guys. Help me out. Press that like button. Leave me a comment on YouTube. Whatever you thought was my craziest idea and you think I'm an idiot, let me know that in the comments. Whatever your favorite move was or something I missed out on, something I forgot to do that you think I should have put in there, please be able to leave that in the comments. That really, really helps a lot with being able to go that route. Big shout out to my fantastic producer, Chris F., helping us out, bringing all your comments up and starring all the good questions. I appreciate you guys very, very much. I miss my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. We will be back next week doing our kind of season recap show, giving out season awards, wrapping things up before we pivot and start looking into which players we think we should re-sign on the roster, priority free agents, all the different pieces that come up. So on behalf of everybody else here, thank you guys very, very much. It really, really means a lot. All the comments and activity and questions, checking out all the nerdy stuff that I do here and the way I try to explain it to everybody. I appreciate you, supporting us and giving us all of your time and energy here. But on behalf of Chris and on behalf of Aaron and everybody else at Cover One, you have been listening to the Greg Tompsett Sports Show, and we are out.